Hi everyone, this is Amy Heard Davison coming to you live from my home in Vienna. As you know, our Holy Comforter Marriage Retreat has moved to a home version, and I appreciate the patience that you all have had as I've transitioned, as we all have, from our previous lives to the lives we're living now. My psychology practice is still open, but I'm doing everything online, and that's been quite an interesting transition to make. And a lot more is happening from the home right now. So I hope things are going well for you. I hope you've been able to appreciate all that Holy Comforter's been able to do for us and the resources that they're sending out and the opportunities that they're giving us to connect online. And I hope that you're finding those for yourselves. So my intent originally was to focus on communication and spirituality, but I'm going to do the retreat in two parts. And today we're going to focus on communication. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background, and I'm sending you a lot of practice exercises that you can use over the course of the next week or two until the next module comes out. So this quote gives us a really helpful frame for how important our marriages are to our lives, how many tendrils go out into each of the aspects of our lives, and how I think it also is a useful reflection right now to recognize that all of these things are now functioning in such a different way. Our workplace is different. For most of it's in our home. How we interact with our community has changed dramatically. Certainly how we interact with friends and family who don't live with us is different, and that it puts such a strain. We are not creatures that love change. So what we want to be able to recognize is that there are opportunities in this, and also to have a lot of grace with ourselves and with each other to find new ways of getting through. So building your relationship is a powerful way to help cope. We know that our core relationship with our partner is one of the elements that is most predictive of our happiness and satisfaction in life. And we also know that that forms the basis for a happy family and a happy life. So the resource that I wanted to talk a little bit more about is the Couple Checkup. And this is used in a lot of churches, and by the Episcopal Church specifically, as the foundation for the Prepare, Enrich curriculum. And so Katie Krogh, who does a lot, for us as the head of the marriage ministry, was able to find it, and we're going to look to bringing more of this information into our life and into the marriage ministry. But their book, The Couple Checkup, reports on research that they have done, a survey of about 50,000 couples nationwide. And in that survey, these 5 factors really rose to the top as being the keys to a happy marriage: communication, closeness, flexibility, personality compatibility, and conflict resolution. And we're going to focus on conflict resolution and communication for the work that we're doing right now. And certainly it's very difficult to come through any problem without that essential communication skill. We know that the day-to-day communication is really important. So how couples talk with one another, how they interact, that makes a difference in their overall satisfaction and in how they see their relationship, how successful they find it to be. And communication serves 2 key purposes. So one of them is absolutely that conflict resolution, problem-solving, negotiation piece. And the other is creating intimacy and connection. And I always say when I'm working with couples that communication skills will not fix your relationship, but it is very hard to fix a relationship without them. So building communication is a foundation. the first skill that I'd like for us to review is the three-part message. And these three elements really give you a way of communicating around a wide variety. Just about every issue can be framed in this way. So you begin with what is the problem or what is the issue at hand. And in communication in general, it's always helpful to be brief and specific. We'll talk about some of the ways in which that can go wrong, but stating what is the problem, why is it a problem, and that means why is it a problem for you, the speaker? What about it is meaningful? What are your feelings about it? How does it impact you? And then third is what do you need? And this is where you have an opportunity to express that need or to make a specific request. So what it sounds like when you put all of these three elements together is when you, and we can start with a positive example. So when you greet me when you walk in the door, I feel appreciated and cared for. I would like to ask you to do that on a regular basis, or to keep doing that on a regular basis, right? So when you, I feel, and I would like. Now there's one thing I want to mention about this. We said you want to keep it specific and brief, and you want to really own your own need, your request within a couple. It's very important to recognize that both people are fully empowered to make requests and to have needs, and also that both people are fully empowered to say no or yes or maybe or can we do it differently. And when you make a feeling statement, when you want your partner to understand the impact this has on you, you really need to include an emotion. For many of us, the natural tendency is to say, I feel that you are doing this. And that's not actually a feeling. It may be a belief, it may be an opinion, but it's not a feeling. So really work on being able to use your feeling words, and they don't have to be flowery. They don't have to be, you don't have to have lots of feelings, but you want to really understand what is the feeling that's coming up for you. Is it confusion? Is it frustration? Is it feeling unimportant? So the second skill is reflective listening. And what we're wanting to focus on here are, first of all, why is this so important? And reflective listening is really a way to engage with your partner, to allow them to feel heard and validated, to be a part of their experience. And by reflecting on what you hear, by giving them a chance to clarify, it fosters teamwork and connection. And it also encourages further communication, because when we feel heard, we're much more likely to open up, both in the moment and over time in future situations. The specific approaches that you can use for reflective listening include mirroring. So this is when we just repeat what our partner has said as a way of conveying that we're open, we're listening, we're understanding. You can also paraphrase, and this is when you would restate what your partner said in some new words, right? But you can certainly reflect some of the same words. And a part of this helps to clarify that you are understanding what they're saying. And then you can reflect meaning. Now you can use all three of these techniques simultaneously, but when you reflect meaning, you're reiterating both the content and also the feelings or emotions that your partner has either explicitly stated or that you seem to be observing in them. So traps to avoid, and these are very common, and it's not that there is not a place for problem solving, explaining, or trying to convince. But when you are doing reflective listening, when you are in a place of wanting to understand, when you shift away from their experience and go to how can we solve this, how can we change this, or here's what I meant by this, or here's why this wasn't that way, then it really reduces the likelihood that communication will be able to be effective. And it also means that you're thinking about what your role is rather than just being in their experience in the moment. So reflective listening, very powerful tool for couples. And it's a very powerful tool for creating intimacy. So reflective listening can be used in all of these situations. It can be used when couples are having a meaningful dialogue, whenever they are self-disclosing. It can even be used with assertiveness and I statements. There's always a speaker, there's always a listener. Whenever you are reflecting back, you can certainly talk about what your experience was of what they were saying. And since you're often taking turns in communication, then there will be a time to go back and say, here's what was happening for me. So active listening, this is reflective listening is sort of a component of active listening. And then daily compliments, not necessarily a place to practice your reflective listening, but we know both from the research that was done for the couple checkup and also by the Gottman Institute that it's, again, those day-to-day interactions, how we speak to one another, our nonverbals, our tone of voice, and also the fact that we are willing to compliment one another and to really be partners who are in connection. So I do just want to mention a few core problems that can come up. I talked about things to avoid in reflective listening, but these are much broader communication patterns that were identified first by Dr. John Gottman in his extensive work with couples. And what they learned is that the four horsemen, as they called them, whenever they observe them in a marriage, in a relationship, then they typically saw that the couples were distressed. So when they were frequently used, the four horsemen are criticism, defensiveness, and those two typically go together, right? If we're criticized, we tend to get defensive. And, then it sets up a cycle because communication isn't happening. And so defensiveness makes one partner feel like they're not heard or their partner isn't willing to take responsibility. And then it feeds back into the cycle of criticism. And then contempt and stonewalling can also go together. And contempt is sort of taking criticism up a notch. It's really an emotion that comes out, and it can be often demonstrated in nonverbal ways like eye rolling or sighing. And when that happens, it often shuts people down. And that's what happens with stonewalling, just not being willing to engage. Sometimes that means physically withdrawing by leaving the room or leaving the house. But if these are patterns that you've seen in your relationship, first of all, you just want to be aware that they're there. And then there are antidotes that you can use to begin to shift these patterns. So with criticism, what we recommend is that you start with a soft startup. And so this can be either offering a compliment or saying, I understand that this is an issue we've discussed before, something that lets your partner know that you're not just criticizing them, but that you are asking for a change, and something that reminds them that you're a team. With defensiveness, the antidote is to take responsibility. And it's important to note that this doesn't mean that you take responsibility for every problem. And it doesn't even mean that you take responsibility for all of the problem that you are discussing in the moment. But instead, what couples can do is say either, wow, I can see how you would feel that way, given that perspective. Or they can say, you're right, I did say I was going to do that. I'm sorry it was delayed, and I know that must be frustrating to you. And then you still have an opportunity to say, here's why it was delayed, and can you help me problem solve how to keep this from happening in the future? So when you're willing to take responsibility, again, it really sets up that teamwork dynamic. Contempt is something that you need to be able to notice in yourself. And it's the best antidote for that is compassion. In other words, to recognize that your partner is probably hurting as well, that your partner is probably, confused, perhaps angry, and doesn't know exactly how to get out of whatever cycle or problem you're in either. And so recognizing essentially that you're both in the same boat. If you see contempt in your partner, then you might be able to, without saying, I feel like you're being contemptuous right now, you might be able to say, I'm sorry, I just need some help. I don't know how to make this better. What can we do about this? Right? And that gives them an opportunity, again, to join you in the shared work of a relationship. And then with stonewalling, what the stonewaller can do is to begin to reach out. And reaching out does not mean reaching out in every way. But if you can even just say, right now I'm feeling overwhelmed, and so I need to take some time to myself, but I will come back to you, right? Stonewalling often happens. We know from research that it happens when people are physiologically overwhelmed. They're just in overload. And so rather than say or do something that they would regret, they often retreat. And instead of just retreating without any explanation to your partner, you can provide that explanation. It also helps to work on some of the self-soothing exercises that the Gottmans discuss and that are listed in the handout that goes along with this. And that can help you to calm down physiologically so that you don't have to just withdraw. Partners can even work together on how they can help one another calm down in those moments. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not, but if you have it in place, it might be an option. And then if you are the one who feels stonewalled, then again, you want to be able to express how it feels, to be on the receiving end without blame, criticism, or contempt, right? So you want to be able to say, wow, I get that this is a hard conversation and I see that you might not want to keep talking about this. And I'm feeling really, really shut out right now. So I'm wondering if there's something we can do, or if we can find another time that we know we're going to come back to this, or could we shift gears and talk about something a little bit easier so that I don't feel so alone. So again, you're giving your partner options so that they don't just have to stay in a difficult conversation, because that we also know is completely unproductive. But again, beginning to use these antidotes bit by bit can make a big difference in the overall feeling of your relationship. Recognizing there are a lot of nonverbals, and how we interact can often be as important as what we say. And, another thing to keep in mind is that for couples, over time, we all develop a shared history. And so sometimes we can say something that to other people might sound pretty benign or innocuous, and our partner might hear it as being a criticism or, just a dig. So we want to be able to recognize that that type of communication does not fuel or build a relationship. And the more we can be present and intentional about positive communication and building, the easier it is to deal with the times whenever we inevitably slip back into old habits. So that's it for the communication portion. I hope that you enjoy and appreciate the information that is provided in the handout. I have compiled a number of resources and tried to make it as user-friendly as possible, so you will need no explanation and other than what's provided. And I hope to get some more materials out around spirituality, and maybe to even send a few questions in the next couple of weeks that would allow you some more opportunities to discuss, especially the challenges that we are all inevitably feeling in our relationships and in our lives right now. I thank you again for your patience. I look forward to being with you all again in person as soon as possible. And my prayers certainly go out to everyone around the world who right now is struggling in any way, whether it's with illness, whether it's with fighting this as a healthcare worker, whether it's being on the front lines as a first responder, or whether it's just, keeping the lights on as parents and caregivers. So wishes for peace and health to all.